So should we be concerned about the state of the world population, and are we taking enough measures to address this? Joining me now in the studio are Thuraya Ahmed Obaid, Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, and Catherine Budgett-Meakin, a Senior Advisor with the Population Sustainability Network. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. Now, Catherine, let me come to you. Why is there such strong resistance to family planning in countries such as the Philippines?
Well, the Philippines is, of course, a special case because of the complication of the Catholic Church. But it goes much wider than that. Since the 1994 famous conference in Cairo, ICPD, when a great many very excellent commitments were made, family planning, almost without anybody realizing, began to slip down the international agenda. And part of the reason for that was HIV/AIDS, which of course needed a great deal of resources and really substantial thought and intelligence and imagination. But the cake didn't get any bigger, so the cake got cut in the way of HIV/AIDS, and family planning lost out.
Isn't the whole issue of family planning, isn't it really about human rights, and more fundamentally about women's human rights?
It most certainly is, and it is a matter of choice. It's reproductive rights, which is in a sense a development of human rights. But it should be every woman's right with her partner to make informed decisions and be able to fulfill those decisions. But you can be as educated as you like, you can have a PhD, but if you don't have a contraceptive, you've got a baby on the way, or possibly so. And so it's a very, very important thing to make sure that women have not only information, but also the resources to enable them to fulfill their human right, their reproductive right to choose.
So how do we change attitudes like the ones we've just seen in the Philippines?
Well, it's really not easy to change people's attitude, because when we deal with issues like family planning, you're not just dealing with whether the services are available or not, as Catherine has said, contraceptives are available or not, but whether the culture and the value system of the society allows people, and the faith allows people to access it. And so part of the work we try to do is how do we look at work with the community to identify some of the very positive elements that will promote decisions, will promote freedom for women to make decisions and families to make decisions, as well as those values that obstruct the way. And here, behavioral change is a long process. It doesn't happen over one day. But we've discovered lots of very interesting facts when you dig into the culture. And so the question becomes, okay, how do we work? And what we need to do is work with the community to show what happens if women have no access to reproductive health services. But more importantly, we say there are three things that will save a woman's life when she's facing complications of pregnancy or childbirth. The first one is family planning, because as Catherine has said, it allows women to space. The issue is not about the numbers. The issue is women can determine the number and spacing of their children. So she has time to recover, the baby has care, etc. Two, that there will be a skilled birth attendant, somebody who knows how to deliver the baby, and who knows when to stop and say, there is an emergency, move them to a health center, and there you have emergency obstetric care. Once the families understand that, resistance is lowered, and that's from a traditional point of view.
But how do you combat, really, the church to get these viewpoints across?
I think that requires a great deal of discussion. It's such an enormous question, because after all, the Catholic Church is very, very strong in certain parts of the world. And there's also a great deal of misinformation. For instance, in East Africa, there's been real misinformation about condoms, for example, that they cause AIDS, for example. Now, that is so irresponsible. And while indeed I am a Christian, but I do worry very much about one part of the Christian family giving such an unfortunate set of instructions and guidance that women are left without that option to choose. And that is a really, really very serious situation.
But is this also not really a question of who has money and who hasn't? It is access to family control becomes an issue of whether you have got the money to get contraceptives or not.
Certainly, the poor would suffer more, because the rich people can access private sector and so on, and the poor do not, have not. It is part of poverty, but it's much more than poverty. And poverty here is not just the money. It's poverty to access to services, to health, to education, and so on. And once women are educated, then they tend not to want large families. We know, for example, a figure that you might be interested in. We know there are 200 million women in the world who would like to plan their families, but they have no access to the services, or they are unable to obtain them. And of course, most of them are in the poorest countries.
Catherine and Thoraya, thank you so much for joining me. That's it for this edition of People in Power. If you'd like to comment on this report or any other matter, we'd love to hear from you on the usual address, aljazeera.net/English. Until next time, that's it from me. Goodbye.